Hello, I am Libby Broadbent, and I will be reading an excerpt from my young adult fantasy novel entitled Seventh Son. And the only thing you need to know to understand this excerpt is that Button and Runa are twins who have been separated at birth, and they don't know that they're twins. And Button's grandmother, who is actually his mother, has just died. And this is the beginning of the novel. The novel is told between Runa's point of view and Button's point of view. And this is the first section where you'll hear from Runa. It is known that there are great powers conferred upon the seventh son of a seventh son, Runa muttered, her fingers tracing the words. The book smelled like old person and dead leaves, and she shuddered to imagine what the cracked leather cover was actually made of. Louder! It is known that there are great powers, Runa yelled. Not that part. You've already read that part, louse. Eleanor continued to grind with her pestle as a wisp of smoke rose from her mortar bowl, twisting itself into sinuous shapes that seemed to have a life of their own. Runa grimaced, glancing away from what looked like a sneering skull winking at her through the smoke. If the line is unbroken in succession, male child after male child, for both the father and his progeny, her hands were getting tired of holding the great tome. Eleanor had told her repeatedly that it was weighted with knowledge, both magical and arcane, and the only reason she allowed Runa to turn its crackling pages was because Eleanor's eyesight wasn't what it once was. Her failing eyesight was yet another malady she blamed on her absent sister, Chloe or Katie or something or other. Runa could never remember. How her sister was responsible for her eyesight was never explained with anything more than a snorted curse. Blasted Chloe. Or was it Clara? She can see just fine, can't she, eh? Eleanor was the master of the rhetorical question, asking for answers Runa couldn't provide, and then being miffed when she didn't respond. Eh, louse? Am I talking to myself? Yes, always. That's the gist of it, louse, that right there. Seventh and on, without a single nod to them what bears 'em, eh? Why seventh? Why not fifth or eighth? Lord love a duck, you'd think you'd been raised in a tomb. No, not even a tomb. Raised in a mud hole with a mudsucker for your mother, rather than in this lap of luxury with your every whim catered to. Eleanor waved her hand, abandoning her grinding. Runa glanced at the dark corners of the hut, wondering where Eleanor was hiding the luxury. What have I told you about numbers? Runa shrugged. They're important. Important, she says. Eleanor wheezed. They're everything, you wee snot, you little canker sore, you lousy excuse for a... Runa ran her fingers over the engravings on the pages before her. Eleanor's imprecations faded into the usual drone she could ignore, having heard it all before. There may be something to be said for being the seventh son of a seventh son, but what of the daughters? Runa would have asked Eleanor this question if she'd had the inclination, or believed she'd get a decent answer, or if she'd had parents. Runa never thought of herself as a daughter, because daughters implied parents, or at the very least, a mother. Runa only had Eleanor. Pathetic pus bag of a child. Eleanor paused for breath, her one good eye roving around the room until it latched onto Runa. Her other eye had a mind of its own, seeming to be searching for buried treasure somewhere in the depths of her skull. Eleanor's eye seemed surprised to see Runa. What was I saying? I've been practicing, Runa said, closing the book and diverting her guardian from an ongoing recitation of her failings. Watch. Eleanor grunted as Runa pulled a small stone out of her grubby pocket. She rubbed the dirt off to reveal a dull black pebble, just the size of her palm. She wrapped her fingers tightly around it, pressing it to her chest with both hands as she tipped her head back and clenched her eyes shut and... nothing. Tain't working, louse. Runa pressed and clenched and grimaced harder. She felt a fluttering, she was sure she did. A gentle flutter against her cheek, like a bird's wings passing close to her face, soft as a mother's kiss. Nothing. You fail, Eleanor cackled, her chuckle breaking Runa's concentration. She dropped her arms to her sides, resisting the urge to throw the pebble across the room and stomp her feet and rip Eleanor's hair out by the roots. Runa's whole life was comprised of resisting urges. Invisibility is one of the hardest spells to master. Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a softer tone that implied understanding, implied care and concern. Runa was tempted, yet again, to yearn toward that kindness. And you're using the wrong stone. I can feel it. I swear I can. I think I'm really close. I can feel something shifting. You're trying too hard. You cannot want it so badly. Your wanting gets in the way. It muddies up the signal with pride and greed and selfishness. Eleanor's eye blinked, shining as she looked at Runa. She seemed perplexed. Eleanor rarely had room between insults to be perplexed. How can I learn to be invisible if I don't want to be invisible? That doesn't make sense. There has to be a reason. Magic works for a purpose. Eleanor turned in a half circle, glancing into the corners of the hut as if looking for darting bats. She continued to speak, but her eye tracked invisible spirits throughout the room. Something more than just your pride. As if her words had summoned it, the filthy hut seemed to shiver, a fleeting quaver so subtle that Runa thought she had imagined it. The glass vials on the mantel chimed softly in its wake. Eleanor's expression rippled in fear and surprise. Her eye goggled and she staggered slightly, as if a stiff wind had struck her. Did you feel that? Eleanor gaped, clutching the table to steady herself. Yes. The air felt strange, electric, and tingling. She's dead, Eleanor whispered. My sister is dead. Runa's eyes widened in disbelief as she saw something in Eleanor's frightened gaze, something human and thoughtful and sad, as a tear pooled and spilled onto Eleanor's cheek. Runa placed her hand softly on Eleanor's sleeve. She moved in cautiously, drawn to an embrace in the old woman's arms. Eleanor cradled Runa's head, pressing her against her thin chest. Runa wrapped her arms around Eleanor like two question marks, seeking an answer. She felt the shifting in Eleanor's stance almost immediately, but it was too late. She had let down her defenses too soon. The old woman twined her fingers roughly in Runa's tangled hair and yanked her back away from her. Your sister? Runa babbled, desperate to regain the softness of that gaze. How do you know? Quick, quick, quick! Eleanor shrieked, one eye rolling back in her head as if it could look behind her to see the danger that was approaching. Danger was, Runa knew, definitely approaching. Eleanor was all-powerful, and she had never before seen her distressed to the point of such agitation and fear. Eleanor was afraid. What's happening? Runa asked, distractedly grabbing her short knife from the table where she had been using it to whittle a whistle. She tucked it inside the waist of her pants, more from habit than from intention. What are you afraid of? Shut up! Shut up, louse, and make yourself useful, you festering lump of cow dung! Runa relaxed slightly. It couldn't be all that if Runa was wasting time insulting her. Quick, bring me the pendant! Eleanor pointed to the mantle, her fingers shaking like the branch of a wasted oak. Get it, louse, the pendant! He's coming! Eleanor muttered, shoving Runa toward the mantle. He's coming and I'm not ready! I'm not ready! Hellfire and damnation and rotting swamp, gaseous pestilence and putrescence! Eleanor punctuated each imprecation by hurling book after book off the shelf, searching for who knew what. She gave up with the shelves and turned to the old trunk in the corner. She swept off the collection of skulls and bottles and odd bits of leather as Runa watched in amazement. Eleanor fumbled with the lock on the chest, dangling from iron links and looking for all the world as if it had been forged by ogres before the sun had formed in the sky. Runa scrambled her hands over the ledge of the mantle. Bird skeletons, jars of dried entrails, tiny leather-bound books, bunches of dried herbs. She swept them all aside, groping for the box she knew she had seen 50 times, had asked 50 times where it had come from, had been told 50 times to mind her own blasted business. She knew without asking that the pendant resided in the box. And for the very first time, with absolute certainty, like the piercing of an axe into the heart of a log, she knew that inside the box lay a necklace with a green stone pendant which belonged to her. Its name is Agrithel, she said, the name appearing on her tongue like blood from an open wound. She whirled around to see Eleanor shuffling through the contents of the trunk, oblivious to Runa's sudden revelation. The stone's name is Agrithel, and it's mine, Runa said in wonder, taking a step away from the mantle. A burning sensation scorched through her chest, starting between her breasts and flaming across her torso like she'd been speared by a flaming arrow. She gasped, clutching her clothes, certain they were burning on her flesh. Eleanor leapt to her feet as Runa cried out, "Damn it! Son of a hellhound whelped in a morgue! You choose now! You choose now to acknowledge your power!" Eleanor shrieked. Runa fought waves of searing heat, staggering back against the mantel, fingers groping to find the pendant. With a gasp of relief, her fingers closed around the tiny metal box, dented and rusting, no bigger than a mouse, and so cold to the touch she almost dropped it as she drew it toward her. The burning in her chest vanished. Runes and symbols glowed and skittered over its surface, glimmering as they had never done before, even when Runa had played with the box as a child, using it as a building block or a support for a bridge made of cards, or to prop up one of her dolls when they listed sideways. She turned, prepared to defend the box from Eleanor's grasping hands, when the entire hut shivered. Nothing fell from shelves, nothing tumbled from the walls, but the house quivered from floor to ceiling and from dust to air. The silence was so complete, Runa thought she could hear Eleanor's heart beating, even knowing that she didn't have one. A pulsing throb echoed through the tiny hut, starting at the door and rippling across the room in waves like the ripples of a pond when a body has been thrown in, cement tied to its ankles. The walls, somehow, thinned. Runa blinked, not quite able to believe that she could see starlight glimmering through the space where the wall still rippled and pulsed, like a bad dream where everything moved too slowly and her body was in one place, but she could see into another. "She is dead," a voice intoned, deep and flat and so chilling that Runa almost dashed to Eleanor for comfort. "She is dead, Eleanor," said the voice, coming from outside but also from inside Runa's head. "Time will stand still, time will fly. The boy will live, but the girl must die." Eleanor slammed the trunk shut, having found whatever she had been looking for. "Take this, louse," she hissed, thrusting a tattered cloak at Runa, her fear having crystallized to a sharp edge. "Bring the boy to me. Bring Button here. I don't care how you do it." She pushed Runa backward, grabbing a leather satchel as she went and shoving a book and a handful of what looked like coins into it before grasping Runa's shoulders, her fingernails piercing into her skin like coffin nails. "Why does it want Button? And what girl is going to die? And who is that anyway?" Runa staggered backward, her hand wrapped firmly around the box containing Agrithel, which now felt warm like blood. There was a rattle on the door, and the wall shifted inward. Runa shivered as a chuckle reverberated throughout the room. "Let me in, Eleanor," the voice said. "You cannot keep me out. I don't like games, you know." Eleanor whimpered and shoved Runa down through the trap door and under the quivering hut into the damp dark of the underground passage they used to store vegetables. Runa yanked open the tunnel door, gasping as the bite of night air chilled her. She ran. Runa knew who the boy was, and she knew where to find him. She just didn't understand why Button suddenly mattered so much to everyone when she herself seemed to matter not at all.